Welcome to The View from the Front. My name is Stan, and I'm a prior Marine and a proud moderate. Each week, I cover our military and defense news happening around the world. In fact, in every episode, I do three things. First, I cover hotspots happening that could affect our country. Secondly, I present news in a non-scary way. So many news outlets today try to scare you so that you'll tune in and talk about the show to others. They're trying to grow the size of their audience. I'm not like that. Not even close. In fact, in most cases, I downplay news. From Y2K to bird flu, we've all read and heard stories that had us scared and worried. Most of the time, those stories are overhyped and wrong. So I'll dig deep on every topic and show you that in most situations, things aren't as bad as you've been hearing. Finally, at the end of each episode, I share some motivation and encouragement, and also share about one Medal of Honor winner, because we need some motivation, given how hard life is. And we all need to remember the sacrifices of those who came before us, because there are far too many people trying to tear this country down and rip us apart. I'm hoping this show will prove to be an antidote to all the bad happening out there. I want both left and right to come together, to remember that more unites than divides, and to see that our country has faced many challenges before, and we're going to meet the hurdles that are staring at us in the current time. I hope and pray that by the end, I have lowered your blood pressure and inspired you. I hope and pray that I've done just a little to help unite this country. I'm not a big name, or a big show, or a big-time influencer, but I'm serious about how much I love this country. And I know I might just be a silly dreamer, but there's never been anything big accomplished in this world that didn't first start with a dream. How is everyone doing out there? Thanks so much for joining us. I'm honored you're here, truly. I know there are a lot of options for podcasts or news shows out there, so the fact that you're here with me right now, it makes my day. Especially considering I don't think I'm like any of the others. Whether that's good or bad, I'll leave that to you guys. But hey, a couple of short little things before we get into the news. And my goodness, was there a lot of news since the last podcast. And that's the first point I want to make. I've said this, I try to say it from time to time. But if you haven't gone to the Substack page in the episode notes and signed up for the free newsletter, you probably want to do that. When the attacks happened this last weekend, when Iran attacked Israel, all of those missiles, I put out like an emergency newsletter. And I always try to do that anytime something big happens. If there's a breakthrough somewhere in Ukraine, when Israel responds, if they do, I'll probably put one out. Anytime there's something pretty big, I put one out, and you guys know I work a full-time job, but I'm able to squeeze them in when something happens. So if you haven't signed up for that email list, it is absolutely free to do so, and I welcome you to sign up for free. No guilt if you don't pay. Absolutely free, and definitely sign up if you haven't done so. There was a lot of confusion on what exactly was happening, and when everything was happening this weekend, if you watch the cable news, it's almost like live streaming uncertainty, honestly. And you can sit there for a couple of hours of live stream uncertainty, or you can enjoy the weekend with your family, and in that hour or two of everything happening, I am monitoring dozens of accounts, as well as news sites, and I pulled together a quick newsletter within a couple of hours that was pretty dead on. I haven't edited anything on it, and you can go look, compare it with everything you know now, like 5 days later, and you'll see pretty accurate for sure, based on nothing but intelligence sources, folks who are keeping up with stuff, people on social media. These are just people that I have, through the years, grown to trust. I've seen how they've reacted to various big news events, and so by monitoring those, I can usually get a pretty accurate picture And some of these people are everything from generals to people who work in intelligence or are retired from intelligence, or former ambassadors or retired folks in the State Department. I try to, as the old saying goes, network up, but I try to follow people. I'm not just like looking at the Twitter account of some someone that's lives in the neighborhood and drinks a six-pack every Friday night. I'm actually trying to follow people who know what they're talking about, who have experience, they're subject matter experts. And so, again, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, definitely do that. I think you'll appreciate being on that list. The second thing I want to mention before we get to all of the news, this is another thing, it won't cost a thing. We've had some great growth in the listener list. We had about 5 or 6 in the past week, but we've been growing organically. As you guys know, it's a small podcast and small station, so to speak, if you count the email newsletter that goes out from time to time. But if you guys can do one of 2 things for me, it would be awesome. If you could tell a friend about the show who you know or think might enjoy it, might appreciate having a lower blood pressure, that would be awesome. And for those more sophisticated listeners out there, if you are on Apple Podcast or Spotify, if you could just drop a review. Obviously, it doesn't cost a thing to do that. That would be awesome, because until the reviews get on up some, I've heard as high as 15, 20, 30. The podcast stations such as Apple Podcasts and Spotify do not recommend it. Or, that you'll often go on there and it'll be like recommended similar shows, or you may be interested in. So, I thought it'd be great if you guys could give me an assist on that and drop a review if you've been enjoying the show. This is obviously, 2024 is an important year. It's frankly a dangerous year. I'm hoping and praying that it's a year of healing and unity. But I also think that this weekly little deal that I do could really help this country to heal and unite and come together. So, again, if you can drop a review, that'd be awesome. Doesn't cost a thing. If you could tell a friend, that would be awesome. You can send them a link, or you can just share this on your social media page. Tell others why you enjoy it. That would be awesome, and I appreciate it in advance, guys. Let's get to the news. We'll begin by talking about Iran attacking Israel. And we are going to be very brief on this because I did put out a newsletter on this, and because by the time you're hearing this on Thursday, you know exactly what happened. But again, just to sum up what happened, and then I want to make one point or share one perspective about that situation. The recap of the event is that Iran launched over 110 medium-range ballistic missiles. They launched 30 cruise missiles. Of course, those are the ones that fly pretty low. They're harder to shoot down. And over 150 uncrewed aerial vehicles, which were those what they call Shahed drones. Now, I have information about all these weapon systems in the newsletter that I put out on Saturday night. So I put the link in that in the Substack notes. But again, 110 ballistic missiles, which are the ones that go very high in the sky, 30 cruise missiles, which are low flying, and then there are the much slower flying, propeller-bladed aerial drones, what are called Shahed drones. So that Iran launches this massive attack, and as you have heard, it was pretty much a complete dud. In fact, as of Wednesday night, no one has even died from it. Almost everything was intercepted, and they were intercepted by both Israel, the United States, and even places such as Jordan. And there's even a fair amount of talk that other countries such as Iraq, Saudi Arabia, some others apparently helped make sure that Israel knew where these weapons were coming from, because there were even weapons fired from Yemen, which is to the south of Israel, but completely based on this coalition of widely disparate countries came together and knocked all of these weapons basically down. A few got through but were off target, and so some debris, and there was an impact or two near an airfield, but basically it's just incredible that they were able to stop this very large attack. So that's the summary. And I should give a shout out to all of the U.S. forces that were involved in that. The Pentagon has identified that a couple of Air Force air wings took part, or squadrons, and then so those fighters shot down quite a few of them. But there were also a couple of ships involved, 2 U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Arleigh Burke and the USS Carney, and together all U.S. forces destroyed more than 80 UAVs and 6 ballistic missiles. So they took out a good portion of them just on their own. Besides that, the United Kingdom also used Royal Air Force jets, and they had some Air Force refueling tankers involved that helped take part in the operation. I believe I saw that the UK had shot down about 30 of the missiles themselves. Of course, Jordan's Air Force shot down dozens of Iranian drones, and that was, for me, one of the more surprising parts of this defensive operation that Israel and the United States pulled together, is that Jordan is clearly a country that I don't think Iran expected to take part in this, but Jordan's own Air Force took part, shot down dozens. So that only left the remnants of 150 or so, and Israel did a good job of knocking all of those down. They have some very advanced air defense throughout Israel, and so that's what happened. It was mostly a dud, but the fact that the defensive capabilities of these jets and these nations and this air defense brought up a very big point that was pointed out on several different outlets and stations. I just want to share the conversation from one of the favorite things I like to listen to is The Bulwark. I often quote from there. But this conversation was between Tim Miller, it was between Ben Wittes, and Bill Kristol, and it's in that order. So you're going to hear a question from Tim Miller. He is the host of the Bulwark podcast. He is a conservative who's a never Trumper. Then you will hear from Ben Wittes. Ben Wittes is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. He's also the co-founded and editor-in-chief of Lawfare, and he's a legal analyst for NBC News. He writes for The Atlantic. So he's moderate to left, I think is how he would term himself, although he is pro-Ukraine as far as some of the funding. And then the final person you'll hear speak is Bill Kristol. He is a hard-right conservative, although he has been against Trump. He obviously favors Ukrainian funding as well. But I want you to hear this clip from them. Again, the order will be Tim Miller asking the question, then Ben Wittes will discuss it a bit, and then Bill Kristol will come in at the end with a few points. This is a really important point.
But first, I wanted to have both of you guys, because I do think that the Iran attack on Israel put the situation in Ukraine in a little bit of a different perspective. There was one tweet from Jay in Kyiv that I wanted to just share and get both of your reaction to. After seeing U.S. and British jets shoot down hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones last night, saving thousands of Israeli lives, everyone in Ukraine is saying the same thing. The Russian military is weaker than Iran's. But not only will allies not shoot down Russian missiles, they won't even give us the jets to do it ourselves. We even know where all Russia's bomber aircraft sit, but allies refuse to give us the tools to destroy them. Russia is completely destroying Ukraine. It's only getting worse. Whose side is the U.S. on? Ugh. Pretty compelling from Jay in Ukraine. Ben?
First of all, I spent a lot of the weekend with Ukrainians, and that is a quite widespread sentiment. Not the whose side is the U.S. on, but why not us? It's a little bit more plaintive and less aggressive than that in my experience. But there's this sense, look, Israel is not a NATO ally. It's actually very similarly situated to Ukraine in the U.S. security constellation. That is a extremely close non-ally partner, right? We don't have a treaty relationship with Israel. We have a highly developed military aid relationship and diplomatic relationship. And it's very fair for Ukrainians to say, hey, if the U.S. has this capability, both to give the Israelis this capability, and a lot of that was done by the Israeli Air Force, which is a first-rate Air Force, Why can't the U.S. supply the Ukrainians with that kind of capability? And to the extent the U.S. did it itself, and the U.S. did a lot of it itself, why not do that here? And there are a lot of dead Ukrainians who would be alive today if they were Israeli.
Bill?
Oh, that's well said. I mean, just three quick points, mostly echoing Ben, but I mean, one, it's so beyond disgraceful that Congress has sat on this aid package for 6 months. There's so much blood on their hands. It's not on Congress's hands. It's on the Republicans in the House, on their hands. Maybe that'll change this week, but the damage that is done on the ground, as well as more broadly in terms of U.S. foreign policy, is really, I think, the greatest damage I know of any Congress doing in my memory over these 6 months. Secondly, the Biden administration could have and should have done more in terms of providing weapons at different stages. And I think they've, as I say, they've done pretty well, but not enough. And it became more obvious that it wasn't enough, and they still didn't really ratchet it up. And third, I've always thought, when there was talk very early on about a no-fly zone in Ukraine, it's really worth looking at. I mean, we do have NATO in the U.S. We did it in the Balkans. We didn't have a treaty relationship there against Milosevic. We've done it in effect with Israel. And I think that's a strong case for thinking about expanding the U.S. and NATO role in terms of stopping Russia from pummeling Ukraine from the air.
It's pretty compelling on all sides for me.
I hope you got something out of that. And I do believe that the successful defense of Israel and its allies from this very large attack has helped move forward the idea that Ukraine needs more air defense, needs more funding from the United States to help try to match what it's getting from Europe as it tries to defend itself from these massive attacks from Russia. I do plan to get into this a tad later in the show, but let me first talk about what the Israeli response might be. I debated playing some audio from various folks who have weighed in on this, but from what I have seen, and we're now approaching the, half a week after the attack, there's been a wide range of options discussed. The Biden administration is urging Israel not to even respond, to take the position that Iran's attack was such a weak had such a weak effect on Israel, was almost a joke. And since such a wide coalition that's loosely held together, it would still be in place, the Biden administration is urging Israel to not even respond, to basically let Iran look like a laughingstock, which is pretty much what it looks like. In fact, it's so bad that Iran has had to play propaganda to its people, trying to pretend that the attack was more successful than it actually was. Having said that, from the Israeli perspective, this was an incredibly large attack against Israel, and they look at it as it shouldn't matter that the actual results were almost minimal. The reality was it was an unprecedented direct attack from Iran, which typically uses proxies or third-party militia / terrorist groups to attack Israel. They try to kind of keep their hands off or at a distance, so they usually train and arm groups to attack Israel. In this case, Iran went all out at trying to hit Israel. And so the Israeli position from some is that they attacked us with an all-out aerial assault that could have been dreadful, even horrendous potentially. And so the Israelis say, it doesn't matter that we stopped it. We were attacked. We need to respond harshly. So that's what some are saying. Such a response would include some type of large-scale attack inside Iran, but there are some airspace issues, and so if you listen to the analyst, there's a wide spectrum of what Israel might do, from a very wide-scale attack against Iran, possibly even hitting some of their nuclear facilities, to a more middle ground approach with maybe they just hit where the Shahed drones are manufactured at. Maybe they just hit some Iranian naval ships outside Iran. Maybe they don't hit Iran at all. They only hit exterior targets such as Iranian proxies, maybe some Iranian ships, to some are even saying maybe they just do some type of cyber attacks, which we may never even hear about, that could cause internal damage to Iran's economy or to whatever they decide to hit. So that's kind of the broad range of possibilities that I've read about. And the big wild card in this, of course, is Benjamin Netanyahu, whose political career is definitely in a precarious situation. And so it's almost in his interest to do some type of aggressive response, since the longer that the war continues inside Gaza, and now this newer, larger potential conflict with Iran, as long as those things stay at a high level, those who oppose him, the weak political position he's on, will not really matter, because Israel needs a leader while the fighting continues. So it's a very challenging diplomatic situation for the entire world, for the United States, and for the Middle East. So there's a lot on the line, including that fragile coalition. The Iranian attack definitely put Israel back in a great diplomatic position, so they may try to temper their reaction to keep more international support. I mean, they literally had the United Kingdom, the United States, Jordan, and others helping stop this attack. That's a good place to be when a week or two earlier, Israel was being seen as a country that was being too aggressive in its war inside Gaza. As I said all the way back in October or November of last year on a podcast, the entire situation with Israel and Palestine and the Middle East is a quagmire, politically speaking, and from a national security perspective. And it's one I don't like to wade into very often. I don't like to spend a lot of time on. And so I'm not going to say any more about this situation, because there are people that think Israel can't do any wrong. There are people who think Israel can't do any right. There are people who think Hamas can't do any wrong or can't do any right. Both sides. It's a contentious issue, and I don't think discussing it at length really is going to convince anyone of anything or do anything that's in any way a positive. I will just close this subject by saying that Iran has promised that if Israel were to do some type of attack, especially inside Iran, that they will respond with a wide and large-scale response. Iran says the situation is over. Israel says the situation is not over until Israel decides what it's going to do. So I'll just end by saying, if there were to be some kind of response by Israel, I do plan on trying to put out an emergency newsletter. If it's something even remotely middle to scale or larger, I will definitely do my best to put out a newsletter, kind of an emergency newsletter within an hour or two, or as it's happening. Once there's enough that I can firmly say this is for sure what is happening, I'll put that out. So if you haven't signed up on the new email list that I mentioned at the first part of the show, just make sure you do that. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the chances of Ukraine funding passing the House, finally, 6 months after the fact. And I'm going to tell you 4 reasons, even though I'm somewhat skeptical, 4 reasons that I'm finally starting to think it will pass this week. I will share those after this break. Just a quick reminder, if you love what you're listening to and would like to support what I'm doing, you can sign up on my Substack page or on my Patreon page to help support the show. For $5 per month, you can help me grow this into something even bigger. And I think by doing that, in a weird way, you'll help contribute to me pulling off something I really want to do, but at a much larger level. You'll help unify our country, you'll help educate more voters, and ultimately, you'll help more people become more engaged and better informed. We all know that studies prove that more informed, more engaged citizens lead to a better government, and ultimately, that will lead to a better country. I really do have some big dreams for this platform, including increased frequency, but I do need some help getting there. Currently, the show is only supported by listeners such as yourself. We have no sponsors or advertisers, but no pressure, especially if you're new. If you're new, just sit back and enjoy it. But if you've been enjoying this for a while, if it's helped bring a sense of calm and faith in our country, then please consider helping support the show. Details for signing up can be found on my Substack page and in the episode notes. Thanks in advance for your support. I really do appreciate it. Alright, I appreciate you guys sticking around. Let's talk about Ukraine funding now. And this is one of those topics. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse to some degree. And I'm going to say, before I share the 4 reasons that I think it will finally pass the House this week, that there is a chance that Speaker Mike Johnson is playing us. If he is, and this will be the last time he can pull this off. He's done this several times in the past few months. Obviously, we've been talking about Ukraine funding going back to November or December. But I just think it's about to break through. And I'm going to share 4 reasons that I do think it will pass this week that I think are pretty persuasive. And I'm giving him one final chance to do what he says he will do with his own mouth. And besides listening to him, because that's not good enough for me anymore. I've listened to him and he has proven that his words don't mean enough. So I'm bringing in as well some evidence into this argument. So I'm making the argument that I do think it will pass. I've got 4 reasons. Let's just begin with the first one. The first bit of evidence that I want to put out as the case for this argument is a short clip from GOP Congressman Mike Turner. He's the chair of the House Intel Committee. He's very powerful, and he went on NBC News this week on Sunday on Meet the Press to say that he expects the bill to pass this week. So he says this on a Sunday. I'm going to play what he says to begin with. And I'm going with this first, not as the strongest bit of evidence, but because I think laying this out in a bit of a chronological order from going back to Sunday to tonight on Wednesday will help make the case for why I think this will pass this week. So these are the words of Congressman Mike Turner, chair of the House Intel Committee on Meet the Press, being asked a question by Kristen Welker.
As you know, Donald Trump has been on the sideline saying he doesn't want to see that aid go to Ukraine unless it's in the form of a loan. But just very quickly, do you expect it to get a vote this week, Congressman?
I do, and I expect it to pass. And by the way, Donald Trump had said on the humanitarian, the support to the Ukrainian government, on the weapons, the military support, everyone has been very much on the side of understanding that we're at a critical point. Russia's beginning to gain ground. Ukraine is beginning to lose the ability to defend itself. And the United States must step up and provide Ukraine the weapons that they need. And I think we're going to see overwhelming support for that in the House this week.
So there is point 1. And I will say, I think part of what happened is we discussed a week or 2 ago that massive utility thermal producing electricity plant inside Ukraine that got hit. And I think that played a pretty big role because the Ukrainian utilities, the electrical grid, so to speak, is on shaky ground right now. And if you think about a blackout after further strikes on it, knocking out the power for almost 40 million Ukrainians, destabilizing that country, and millions of people flooding west into Poland and other countries in Europe, that is a terrifying thought. So I think there was almost a wake-up call after the strike on that plant and the fact that more missiles and Shahed drones from Russia are getting through because there's just not enough air defense, and the front lines on Ukraine, Russia is slowly but surely advancing. And so if there was a major breakthrough of some kind, not super likely, but certainly possible, as Ukraine struggles to have to deal with ammunition shortages, these are things that I think have scared the Republican Party a little bit, because we're just in April. There's a major election in November where every single one of them in the House will face re-election. And if there was some type of catastrophe inside Ukraine, that's not going to play well in November, or for the months and months of headlines that are going to happen until November. So that's point one. Let's move to point two. Point two are the words of the speaker himself. These are words that were said by him on Wednesday, while I was actually recording the podcast, in fact, and they were so important I definitely wanted to share them, because the tenor of his language has been changing every single day. Monday, Tuesday, today he's had a couple of different comments come out, and these are the strongest yet. So let me play the words of Speaker Mike Johnson.
I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. I think providing lethal aid to Ukraine right now is critically important. I really do. I really do believe the intel and the briefings that we've gotten that I believe Xi and Vladimir Putin and Iran really are an axis of evil. I think they're in coordination on this. I think that Vladimir Putin would continue to march through Europe if he were allowed. I think he might go to the Balkans next. I think he might have a showdown with Poland or one of our NATO allies. To put it bluntly, I would rather send bullets to Ukraine than American boys. My son is going to begin in the Naval Academy this fall. This is a live fire exercise for me, as it is so many American families. This is not a game. It's not a joke. We can't play politics of this. We have to do the right thing. And I'm going to allow an opportunity for every single member of the House to vote their conscience and their will on this. And I think that's the way this institution is supposed to work. And I'm willing to take personal risk for that, because we have to do the right thing, and history will judge us.
There you go. Those are the words of Speaker Mike Johnson. And I think part of what you detect in his voice, I hope anyway, that he has gotten more briefings and become convinced of it. But I do think a small role that also happened in the past couple of days, or a small thing that happened, is we all know that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a congressman from Georgia, Republican on the far right, had made a motion to vacate the speaker's, to basically vacate Mike Johnson, to put a vote up to get rid of him. And during this week, a second Republican congressman did as well. So Mike Johnson's position is on the thinnest of ice with Republicans. And I think, if I had to guess, he's coming around to the fact that the Democrats have been signaling to him, hey, put the Ukraine vote out there. We've got your back. We will help vote to keep you as speaker, because neither side honestly wants to spend weeks trying to select another speaker. There's a very narrow margin, and I think Speaker Mike Johnson has just come to the realization this week that he can't possibly continue as speaker with a 1 or 2 vote margin. It's the slimmest margin in the world, and one Republican's actually ending their term this Friday, so he's losing another vote. He's basically got like a 1 vote margin, and one of those votes is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and there's several other far-right Republicans that are impossible to corral or control. So I think he's come around to the realization that he's going to have to shift to the middle, and he's going to have to rely on the Democrats in order to stay as speaker. That's just my own conjecture, but I think I'm pretty close to being correct on that point. Let's move to point 3. Point 3 is an opinion piece that was pushed pretty hard by Fox News. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene is typically kind of a darling of Fox News. Lots of interviews. She's probably great for viewership because she will say the most off-the-wall, aggressive things. And so, it's fun to watch that kind of stuff if you're not too worried about if the country's burning down. But Fox News on Wednesday, today, the day I'm recording this, ran an opinion piece that they heavily promoted. And the headline pretty much says it all. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an idiot. She is trying to wreck the GOP. And so this column, and I've got a link to it in the episode notes, kind of points out all the bad things Marjorie Taylor Greene has done in the past, including showing sexually explicit photos of Hunter Biden during a committee hearing in Congress, which was on C-SPAN, of course. Talks about her fight with Lauren Boebert, a congresswoman who, I can't even believe I have to say this, but Marjorie Taylor Greene called a female dog on the House floor. And so that wasn't exactly very good and certainly wasn't very Christian. So the column goes into that. And basically the column makes the point that Marjorie Taylor Greene is hurting the Republican Party and that she shouldn't be seen as someone that should be listened to, that she's reckless, and that Speaker Mike Johnson basically shouldn't listen to her and should do what he can to move the party in the right direction. So that was my point 3. It's an interesting shift that Fox News, at least for today, has really gone after her and pushed it hard. And the crazy thing is if you look on the social media sites, a lot of people on the right are coming around to realize that you just cannot have a single congressperson on the far right or left or anywhere controlling the entire Congress. And so there's a lot of comments from some pretty conservative people saying that she's just gone too far with the motion to vacate and it's just time to stop listening to her because she's holding the entire GOP hostage. So that's point number 3. Fox News has finally taken the back of Speaker Mike Johnson against those on the far right. And my 4th and final point is I believe that Speaker Mike Johnson went down, talked with former President Trump on Friday. We all know that. But I think he has seen former President Trump in a courtroom every day this week, looking a bit frustrated, maybe a bit tired. You guys saw the headlines, but arguably looking a bit weakened. And I think there's starting to be a dawning realization that former President Trump is going to spend a fair amount of time in a courtroom, is going to have less time to fundraise, and it looks like support might be starting to peel away. And so my 4th and final point is I think Speaker Mike Johnson is coming to realize that the Ukraine issue divides Republicans enough that it's an issue that is not a winning issue. And I think Speaker Mike Johnson is looking toward November and knows that he needs to try to salvage the House if at all possible. Not real sure how likely that's even possible on a good day, but also try to salvage the Senate and the Republican Party and do what he can to potentially get former President Trump reelected for 2024, moving into 2025. And I think he's just come to the realization that between the abortion issue and some other uphill fights, they need to get Ukraine funding passed so that this will be off of the table and will stop riling up some of those Republicans that might vote for Trump. Get the Ukraine thing through, take that off the table. Let's not have another 6 months of headlines every single week about how bad Ukraine is and why it's all Speaker Mike Johnson and the GOP's fault. So that's my point number 4, is I think it's a political reality that enough people support it that it just needs to just be done. Pass it, get it off the table, move on. Those are the 4 reasons I think it'll happen. Again, there's a small chance we're being played. This will be the absolute last time I let him play me if he is, but I don't actually think he's playing us this week, so we'll know by next week for sure. I would love to hear your all's thoughts on the matter. It looks like, based on where things are right now, that it will be late Friday or Saturday before a vote actually happens. So if you want to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, leave a comment on the podcast. You can comment at Substack, or you can mention me on Twitter or X, or you can even send an email. And tell me where you're at on this. And are we being played, or is it finally going to happen? I would love to hear what you guys think. And this is one of those that you gotta do it by Friday-ish. And the longer you wait, don't be sending me no email or comment on a Saturday when it's obvious which way it's going. I want emails tomorrow, Thursday, when it's up in the air. I want to know what you guys think. Let's call it. It's like trying to predict the Super Bowl or something. Put your money where your mouth is. Put a comment down or send me an email or tell me on social media, and let's see what happens. Alright, so I see the show's already running long. We've got 2 more very brief news items, and then we're going to get to the best part of the show, which is, of course, the motivation and encouragement section, which I now call the Never Ever Give Up segment. The first news item is Germany has announced it will send an additional Patriot air defense battery to Ukraine. This is the 3rd one they've sent, and this does follow the news that I've talked about the past couple of weeks where Ukraine had a very substantial part of its electrical grid, the production part of it, the thermal plant that I mentioned, I think it was 2 weeks ago, hit. And so Ukraine is in a pretty vulnerable situation. And as such, Germany announced an unplanned and emergency additional Patriot air defense battery to be sent to Ukraine, which was supposed to be sent very, very quickly. No exact date on how fast, like within a day or two, but like very quickly, emergency level type, get it down there. So that's the first bit of news. The second bit of news is an update to the aggression showed by China toward the Philippines. The U.S. has responded to that. I've talked about in the past couple of weeks that this was a pretty serious hotspot that I could not believe was not getting more attention in the media. There's still not a ton of attention in the media. I know we've got a lot going on in the U.S. Having said that, the U.S. has responded to the aggression, and they have deployed a pretty sophisticated, impressive missile system to the Philippines. And like, it's already there. It actually went there 2 days ago. It's called the Typhoon. I've got some information about it in the episode notes. But it can fire air defense missiles. They're basically like vertical launch tubes that you would see on ships. The Army, as a way to contribute to any potential conflict in the Pacific, developed a almost like modular type system, which is basically on the trailers of like a tractor trailer, so that they could put these naval tubes and they could launch a couple of things from it. One, they can either launch long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, which have an extreme range going out almost to 1,000 miles. These things can go a long ways. In fact, I paused the recording because I wanted to see exactly what the range is. It's 1,500 miles. 1,500 miles. So this system has the Tomahawk, plenty of them. So Tomahawk cruise missile system, 1,500 miles. And then it has air defense missiles that shoot up vertically to help shoot down any incoming aircraft or missiles. And I want to say, so this is the first time this thing's been deployed. And here's what's interesting. A couple things, actually. The first thing is, it sure appears to me that they deployed this thing with a serious sense of urgency. They put this system on a C-17 Globemaster, which is the largest U.S. Air Force jet literally available, flew it 8,000 miles in 15 hours and landed it in the Philippines. So to me, it's the first ever deployment. Very quickly done. So I think the U.S. wanted to be like, hey, China, you got these little Coast Guard cutters down here, these small ships with these water cannons. We're going to put something inside the Philippines that will remind you very quickly. We can put every ship you've got, and they've got about a dozen or so down there. We can put them on the bottom in a hurry. So they sent this thing very quickly. One other point I'll make, and I probably need to wrap this up anyway. When they were discussing this, so these comments are not to be inflammatory or were not given right now. These are comments from about 4 months ago in this article that I've put in the episode notes. But a reporter had asked some questions about the capabilities of this system. And I want to just share what they said many months ago before this happened, when they were just talking about the concept of this new weapon system for the Army. These comments were made by a general in the Army. His name is Brigadier General Bernard Harrington, and he said that this is a significant step in our partnership with the Philippines, our oldest treaty ally in the region. And he said, we're grateful to our partners in the armed forces of the Philippines, and we're excited to expand our security cooperation as we bring this new capability to the area. Now, the comments from a few months ago, though, talked about that the Typhoon, the missiles, these cruise missiles, could cover the entire Luzon Strait, which is near the Philippines. They could also reach the Chinese coast. They could reach various Chinese army bases in the South China Sea. And months ago, before it was quite so tense, the idea behind this weapon system is that it could enhance Philippine maritime defense capabilities. And they go on to talk about, this is the part I really want to get across. The Army Typhoon weapon system provides fires in a combined effort with other military branches such as the Marine Corps and Navy. General Harrington stated that the system delivered a credible, land-based, maritime strike capability during an activation ceremony of a Typhoon battery earlier this year. There was also a quote during that ceremony by a lieutenant colonel named Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Blaine, who said, and he would be the commander of the 5th Battalion, 3rd Field Artillery Regiment, when he was asked about the missile batteries, he said, "So ultimately, we strive to deter the next fight. But if this is unsuccessful, I know that this unit stands ready to complete its mission of providing counter-maritime capability in the Pacific." So, I've got the link to an article in the episode notes. I've got an image from the Army on what this thing looks like. Again, it's anti-air, anti-ship, and it's going to probably be pretty frustrating for China because it obviously takes hours and hours and hours and hours to get these ships down to this area. And the fact that the U.S. can fly in this missile system in 18 hours, which is a far greater threat to these Coast Guard cutters that China has been employing with water cannons, I think it's just a good reminder to China that they probably just need to just slow their roll a little bit and just watch what they're doing, because they are definitely pushing around a country that has a treaty, alliance, mutual defense treaty with the United States. And we have capabilities that we have not really brought to play that we can. So I'm actually glad to see the Biden administration do this, because I have not been too pleased with how aggressive China has been. So this is hopefully the first move in just a very stern, you guys need to stop what you're doing. So in my opinion, that's good news there, because the last thing we need is China feeling like they can be too aggressive and pushing something to the point to where actual armed conflict begins with something other than water cannons. So we've had a lot of news. Let's get to what I know everyone is waiting for. I call this the Never Ever Give Up segment. And I call it the Never Ever Give Up segment because we must never ever give up as a country. Though we face great division, a massive debt burden, and probably future problems that none of us could even predict. But we must never give up as a country. And I believe we must stay united. And also, as individuals, we must never, ever give up. We've got family and friends counting on us. So in this section, I'm going to share some motivation to help encourage you. I'd like to begin by honoring a Medal of Honor recipient. If you don't know, the Medal of Honor is the highest military decoration you can possibly earn in the military, and it's awarded to service members who have distinguished themselves by acts of valor. The medal is typically awarded by the President of the United States upon the recommendation of the armed services. One final footnote before I read this week's. As I said when I first began this back in April, I am just going in alphabetical order because I could not possibly decide which wars to begin with, which services, etc. And since there's more than 3,000 of these, it was just too much. So I'm just going very simplistic alphabetical order. This week, we are to the name John Adams. Of course, 2 weeks ago, it was Charles Abrell. Then it was Lucian Adams. We're now to John Adams. But a couple of things about this week. The John Adams award citation was very short. And when I say very short, I mean very short, like one sentence. And this was back during the Boxer Rebellion back in 1900. Actually, 1899 to 1901 is when the official span of the Boxer Rebellion was. But it was just one sentence. And so I'm like, man, like one sentence seems a little short. So I went to the next one. And there's another gentleman named John Adams, and that one is also one sentence from the Civil War. So I guess as we go through these, some of these may be short, and if they're only a sentence, I'll probably do at least a couple. So this week, I'm honoring two individuals. They're both named John Adams, no middle name for either. The first one is, again, during the Boxer Rebellion, and I've got a photo of both of these John Adams individuals, but during the Boxer Rebellion, in the presence of enemy, during the battle near Tientsin, China, July 13th, 1900, Adams distinguished himself by meritorious conduct. So that's all we have on that one. We don't have the typical description of charging trenches or anything like that, or dragging people out of the field of fire. Just one sentence, but apparently John Adams distinguished himself by showing a lot of valor. And then, as I said, the second one, again named John Adams, this one was from the Civil War. We do get a little bit more detail in this one. So John Adams seized the two colors, which those are the flags of various battalions and regiments. Those were a big deal during the Civil War. It was something that a unit never wanted to lose, and it's something that a unit would line up on in long lines as they would fire at each other. So John Adams seized the two colors, or flags, from the hands of a corporal and a lieutenant as they fell mortally wounded. So the two people normally carrying the flags fell. They were obviously had sustained fatal wounds. John Adams runs up, grabs both of them, and I'll continue reading now. And with a color in each hand, advanced across the field to a point where the regiment was reformed on those colors. So if I had to guess, that's all the citation says, but I would imagine that the regiment had taken a lot of fire, was probably about to break, possibly even, run or flee, and John Adams runs forward, grabs two flags, one in each hand, rallies the troops, and they form up on him. So for that, John Adams was awarded the Medal of Honor. Again, I share these Medal of Honor stories each week to remind us of the sacrifices that have been made through the nearly 250 years of American history. More than 1 million Americans have died in war, getting us to this place and time, and I think it's important we remember it, particularly when we have people regularly saying we face a potential civil war, or that we should split because of culture war, or what tax rate we should have, or any other number of silly reasons. I think our forefathers and foremothers would be dumbfounded to think we could rip apart this great nation over such trifling issues. Now, let's share some motivation to make sure that we never, ever give up in our own personal lives. Of course, if you're a regular listener, you know I also speak about never giving up when I discuss PTSD at the end of the show. But for now, let's just talk about some motivation, and we've got some great ones this week. Here is the first one. Replace worrying thoughts with confident ones and see how your life changes. Again, replace worrying thoughts with confident ones and see how your life changes. It's pretty good. Here's the next one. Everything that happens helps you grow, even if it's hard to see right now. Again, everything that happens helps you grow, even if it's hard to see right now. It's hard when you're in those valleys sometimes, isn't it? All right, here's the next one. It never gets easier. You just get better. Again, it never gets easier. You just get better. Man, there's a lot of wisdom in that. Here's the next one. Never put the key to your happiness in someone else's pocket. Again, never put the key to your happiness in someone else's pocket. Here's another one. Spend as much time improving yourself as you spend wishing for a better life. Man, that's a good one. Spend as much time improving yourself as you spend wishing for a better life. I can definitely, on this one, beat up on the guys a bit since I'm a guy, but, we all know that young man who, is maybe not in the best shape, maybe not taking care of themselves as well as they wish, and they just really want to meet that perfect girl, that perfect woman, and it's like you just want to say, you got to put some effort in. These women spend a lot of time on everything from hair to nails to what their clothing looks like, and so you can't be a slob and put on a pair of sweats or not take care of yourself and think that you're going to get the kind of woman that you would like to have. So again, spend as much time improving yourself as you spend wishing for a better life. All right, here's the next one. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. I'll read that one more time. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. We all sell ourselves too short, don't we? All right, here's the next one. It isn't the hours you put in, but what you put in the hours. That is an amazing one. It isn't the hours you put in, but what you put in the hours. All of us know people who work long days or long hours or sometimes even go to the gym for 2 hours. And, if you're spending 3 to 5 minutes between each set, it doesn't matter. If you're at work goofing off and you stay an extra 30 minutes to an hour, to get caught up, you're shorting your family. It's just, effort matters. So it isn't the hours you put in, but what you put in the hours. We'll do one more. No matter what people tell you, words and ideas can change the world. Man, that is such a good one. That is a quote from Robin Williams, who of course is passed now. But again, no matter what people tell you, words and ideas can change the world. That is a great one to end the motivation section on. And then I always like to share a few from the Bible because this book has become such a source of strength and wisdom and calm for me during the past years. So I hope by sharing a few, it might encourage you to get into the Bible yourself, because I think it'll really help you. I'm going to read 3 to begin with. But I will sing of your strength in the morning. I will sing of your love, for you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble. That is from Psalms chapter 59, verse 16. But I will sing of your strength. In the morning I will sing of your love, for you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble. This next one is from Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. That is Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. Again, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. All right, let's do one from Isaiah chapter 12, verse 2. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. Again, that's Isaiah 12, verse 2. I'll read it one more time. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. I also this week want to read a few verses from Psalms. If you want to try to keep up, it's Psalms chapter 90, verses 1 through 4, verse 10, verse 12 through 17. I had read this chapter this week as part of my Bible plan, read the entire Bible in a year, and they were so good that I went back and read the entire chapter again, so hopefully you get something from them. Here goes. Lord, through all the generations, you have been our home. Before the mountains were born, before you gave birth to the earth and the world, from beginning to end, you are God. For you, 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours. 70 years are given to us. Some even live to 80. But even the best years are filled with pain and trouble. Soon they disappear, and we fly away. Teach us to realize the brevity of life, so that we may grow in wisdom. Take pity on your servants. Satisfy us each morning with your unfailing love, so we may sing for joy to the end of our lives. Give us gladness in proportion to our former misery. Replace the evil years with the good. Let us, your servants, see you work again. Let our children see your glory. Again, that was Psalms chapter 90, verses 1 through 4, verse 10, and then verses 12 through 17. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. I hope as you go through this week that you act a little nicer on social media and in the world as well. Smile at folks in the grocery store, do small acts of kindness, and remember that most Americans are good, and they will help you in an emergency, even if you don't agree politically. Now, I have to finish with two things. I want to say a bit about myself and my books in case you're new to the show, and then I need to say some words for those struggling with PTSD or mental illness, especially since veterans are at a 57% higher risk of suicide. First, a bit about myself and my books. I am a military vet. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, all of that time in the infantry, and yes, that does matter. After my enlistment, I went to college at the University of Tennessee. I became a journalist. I spent more than 10 years in the news business. Besides all of that, I've also written 12 books. Those books include a series about a Marine Corps sniper, several novels about a police detective and a private investigator, and a few books about war, such as World War II and Afghanistan. Basically, these are all fast-moving books with lots of action and plot twists, because those are the kind of books I've always enjoyed reading. You can find all of those books in the link in the episode notes, or you can look on Amazon by just searching my name, Stan R. Mitchell. Buying a book, telling a friend about a book, or buying one as a gift for someone, friend or loved one, is a great way to help support the show. And in all seriousness, they're pretty highly rated, and I've been very fortunate to have sold 70,000 copies to date. And I promise you, even though I live in Tennessee, I do not have that many cousins. The second thing I need to talk about is PTSD and suicide for just a moment. This isn't just for our veterans, although I know PTSD does seem to affect veterans at a much higher rate, but it's for anyone. We can all get in a really low spot, but we have to remember that it's a season. It's a valley. If you're having serious issues, please call 988, select 1. You can talk to a crisis line responder anytime, day or night. Whether you're a civilian or a veteran, it doesn't matter. But I do know this is hard to do, and I know most of you won't, so I have to be a little mean here. The fact is that when we had a drill instructor in boot camp pushing us, or maybe a tough coach back in high school, you know that you can go further than when it's just yourself pushing you. So I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be mean for just a moment, and I have to remind you that you cannot give up. Do not lose this fight. Do not make your parents or your family have to plan your funeral. Don't make them feel guilty that they did not check on you, that they could not reach you. You can hold on another day, and if you do, I promise the next day will be a little easier. Now, again, if you're in a fight that you worry you may lose, call someone. Call a friend or a family member. Please, just do that. Or call 988, select 1. But whatever you do, do not quit. You're in a valley and this world needs you. Probably your parents need you. I mean, seriously, who's going to take care of your parents in 30 years? I'm being dead serious here. I just helped take care of my mom while she fought with cancer before she passed. I'm helping take care of my dad now. But who's going to do it for you? Are you going to let the system take care of them? How horrible is that? So you cannot quit. And believe me, there's something you're meant to do. You just can't see it because you're in this immediate fog and pain. You can't see that end result. But there's a mission for you to do. Maybe it's to coach Little League. Maybe it's to help others with PTSD. Maybe it's to run for office. But there's some calling for you. You just haven't found it. But you need to get involved. You need to stop isolating yourself. Go visit a veterans group, the VFW. Visit a church near you. Talk to some family that you have lost touch with. Or maybe reach out to that friend that you've grown apart from. They're probably dying to talk to you. But seriously, if you're struggling, call the hotline 988 and select 1. Or you can also start moving toward God. If you're not willing to make that phone call, read the Bible if you never have. I think it will help. Read some of Psalms or Proverbs, or start with the New Testament, maybe Luke. I think you'll find that the Bible will start drawing you in and changing your life. If you don't have a Bible, you can download a Bible app on your phone, or you can look it up online. There are dozens of sites with it. Even simpler, I have a link in the episode notes that I think can help you. I write a faith-based blog about the Bible and God, and I have a link in my episode notes to a pretty powerful story about my dog, who is a stray that we adopted from the shelter. The title of the article is Be Like Ozzy, Go Near Your Master. I've had a lot of people tell me that story really helped move them, that it was very impactful. So, it's free to read. You got nothing to lose by going to read it. Now, I always like to end each show by reminding people that you can comment anytime. I try to monitor those. You can also reach out privately by email to me at authorstanrmitchell@yahoo.com. And that's in the episode notes, by the way. But again, it's authorstanrmitchell@yahoo.com. Hey, here's one other thing. This podcast is about defense news, but I also do a political blog. So if you love my moderate, optimistic views, you might enjoy that. It's called Thoughts from a Southern Gentleman. You can find a link to the episode notes to that as well, or you can just search that on Google. Hey, thanks for hanging with me this week. It's truly an honor to talk with each of you, and to know that there's a few of you out there who are listening and who care about our country and our military and all the issues that we face. I know there are a lot of scary issues out there, but we're going to get through them together, the same way America's gotten through everything before this. I love you all, but never forget that God loves you more than you can possibly imagine. He is our true Father, so I hope you spend some time with Him this week. If you want true peace and strength and wisdom, make sure you read your Bible some this week. It'll help you a lot. And also, reach out to a friend or anyone who you know is struggling. Whether they are young or old, life is truly hard. We know this. But the true strength of this country is its people, and that includes you folks listening to me right now. So be a leader, be a doer, be a servant to someone. With all of that being said, I'll catch you all next week. You have been listening to The View from the Front. I hope you enjoyed the show.